Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Errol Barrow Center for Creative Imagination. We wish to inform you that no eating, drinking, or smoking is permitted in the theater. Also note that no photography or videography is allowed unless prior permission has been granted by the management of the center. It is at this time that we remind you to turn off or silence your cell phones. Please enjoy the presentation.
Good evening to our distinguished panel, Dr. Karl Payne, Center for Resource Management and Environmental Studies, CERMES, Dr. Brewster, Coastal Zone Management Unit, Mr. William Hinds, Minister of Energy and Business, to our moderator of the evening, Professor Winston Moore, Professor of Economics and Deputy Principal of the University of the West Indies, Capefield campus. I also see in our presence Senator Crystal Drake, the Ministry of Environment, Mr. Noel Wood, Chief Executive Officer of the Nation Group, fellow members of the Nation staff, our valued sponsors, members of the media, specially invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It's indeed an honor to welcome you to tonight's Green Nation's Let's Go Green Together Town Hall meeting. Tonight's meeting has been organized by the Nation Publishing Company in collaboration with the University of the West Indies Capefield campus, as both of these institutions celebrate 50 and 60 years respectively. You can clap for that. Thank you. Environmental matters have always been a focal point for the Nation Publishing Company. And we've been involved in various environmental initiatives in our 50-year tenure. In June 2022, we launched our Green Nation brand in response to growing environmental concerns about climate change and energy efficiency. Under the theme, Our Environment, Our Responsibility, the campaign's primary goal is to foster a sense of responsibility for the environment by providing Barbadians with information, tools, and resources that support a clean, energy-efficient country while simultaneously building sustainable blue and green economies. Tonight's meeting is about one of the many initiatives designed by the Green Nation team since its establishment in June 2022. For those who would be here early would have seen the footage of various cleanups we would have done across the island. And it's just a reflection of where we are as a country and the things that we need to look at. We believe that it's important to capture the public's perspective, and tonight's event is an excellent opportunity to do just that. Therefore, the most important resource in here tonight is you, the audience. We look forward to hearing your thought-provoking ideas and the discourse on this engaging topic, Barbados in 10 years and the environmental journey. Once again, welcome, and I invite the moderator, Professor Winston Moore, to lead the proceedings. Thank you.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and esteemed panel, good evening. I'm Winston Moore, and I'll be the chair of tonight's proceedings. It's with great pleasure that I welcome you all to this thought-provoking panel discussion on Barbados in the next 10 years, an environmental journey with a particular focus on the environment. Today, we gather here to explore the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead, as well as a critical role that environmental conservation and sustainability will play in shaping the future of our beautiful island, Barbados. Barbados, known for its pristine beaches, vibrant culture, and warm hospitality, has long been cherished and as a destination for our tourists. However, we must confront the realities of a rapidly changing world. Climate change, biodiversity loss, and other environmental concerns pose significant threats to the delicate ecosystems that make Barbados so unique and irreplaceable. In the face of these challenges, Barbados has demonstrated commendable leadership and determination to protect and preserve its natural heritage. From adopting renewable energy initiatives to implementing sustainable practices in various sectors, the nation has shown a commitment to forging a greener future. Nonetheless, there is much work to be done. And today's discussion, hosted by Nation Publishing Company Limited, as well as the UWI, and supported by our generous sponsors, serves as an important platform for dialogue, collaboration, and innovative thinking. Our esteemed panelists, experts in their respective fields, have graciously agreed to share their insights, experiences, and visions for Barbados' environmental landscape in the coming decade. From policymakers to scientists, we have assembled a diverse group of individuals who would shed light on the multifaceted dimensions of sustainability and environmental stewardship. Throughout this panel discussion, we will delve into a range of pressing topics. We will explore strategies to mitigate the impacts of climate change, safeguard our coasts, and promote sustainable energy options. We'll discuss the interplay between environmental protection and, of course, economic growth, seeking innovative approaches that foster greener industries and create a harmonious balance between development as well as conservation. Importantly, we will address the need for collaboration at all levels: government, private sector, civil society, and individuals, to build a collective vision for Barbados' environmental future. Together, we can shape policies, enact change, and inspire a generation to embrace sustainable practices that will safeguard the island's natural wonders for generations to come. I encourage each one of you to actively participate in this discussion, asking probing questions, share your insights, and engage in meaningful dialogue that will spark ideas and drive progress. Let us use this platform as a springboard for transformative actions that will make a lasting impact on Barbados' environment. It's now my pleasure to introduce tonight's panelists. First, to my immediate left, Dr. Karl Payne is a lecturer in water resources management at the Center for Resource Management and Environmental Studies, CERMES, the University of West Indies Cave Hill campus. Dr. Payne holds a PhD in water resources engineering from the University of South Florida. He has over 10 years of experience, even though he looks very young, in academia, consulting, and industry, where he has worked in cross-functional teams of scientists and engineers to develop novel algorithms and innovative technologies to address challenges related to the climate crisis. Dr. Payne's research focus is around climate change and resilient water resources management. Dr. Leo Brewster, who's sitting to the left of Dr. Payne, is the director of the Coastal Zone Management Unit, Blue Economy Section, Ministry of the Environment and National Beautification. He possesses a PhD in Integrated Coastal Zone Management from Cardiff University, Wales, UK, with over 34 years, even though he looks very young, of course, of experience in he's very familiar with the development of management strategies and strategic planning for small island integrated coastal zone management, as well as rapid assessment techniques for coastal impacts. He was recently a vice chair of the IOC UNESCO Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, Subcommission for the Caribbean and Adjacent Regions, 2021 to 2023, and is currently the Barbados lead representative on several of the Commonwealth Secretariat Blue Charter action groups. Now, Mr. William Hinds, who is the oldest looking member of the panel. William, you could get me back for that when you present. Mr. William Hinds is the Chief Energy Conservation Officer in the Ministry of Energy and Business. He has a master's degree in alternative energy from the Engineer Department, University of Reading, UK. Mr. Hinds began his involvement in renewable energy in 1983 and has since then been striving to develop the sector at the highest level. His name is synonymous with renewable energy. He was the founding president of Barbados's first Renewable Energy Association in 1983, and he has worked for several regional institutions and international development agencies as a consultant and project manager. Mr. Hinds is the author of 4 books, 2 of which are on solar energy, and he is the recipient of 3 of Barbados's national honors, the Barbados Jubilee Honor, the Silver Crown of Merit, and the Golden Trident of Excellence, all for his work in the area of renewable energy. So we have a very excellent panel to discuss tonight's topic, and I'm really looking forward to these presentations. We're going to give each panelist around 8 to 10 minutes to do an initial presentation, and then we'll get into a discussion. So starting first with Dr. Payne.
Thank you, Professor Moore, for that kind introduction. And it's really an honor to be among such distinguished panelists. I want to start by contextualizing the talk today, which is really around innovation for sustainability. And I think where we are, the stark reality is that we're living in unprecedented times. Since the Industrial Revolution, there has been so much carbon dioxide pumped into the Earth's atmosphere that we are really at the precipice of a climate calamity. And this issue is particularly pernicious because of the cross-cutting nature. The cross-cutting nature means it affects many different sectors that are interrelated. My particular area of research is around water, but you can't talk about the climate crisis affecting water without talking about food security, about health, and about energy as well. So that's the stark reality. And when we look at some of the issues that we're facing in Barbados, on the left, on my left at least, sargassum. This is driven by increasing temperatures, but factors that are beyond our control and really need global type solutions. So these are some of the most intractable problems that we face today. But the point I want to get across here is that we have compounding risk factors. So the image below the sargassum mat is showing nutrient discharges, for example, from agricultural activity, agricultural runoff, but also from poorly designed septic systems. So that nitrogen discharge to the coastal zone, to the coastal environment, compounds this existing issue. And you could add the issue of plastics. There was an article recently coming out of Florida where there was concern about health issues related to the confluence of this sargassum issue, but also with a proliferation of plastics. If we look at the water resources issue, in the north of the island, the issue related to salty water, a lack of water, is problematic. And so from time to time, you still see water tankers having to deliver water to households. Now, the climate crisis will only exacerbate this issue. By 2050, the climate models suggest that there's going to be 10% less water rainfall, and when the rain does fall, it's going to be more intense, so that more of the rain that falls is going to run off into the ocean. So, but on top of that, we already have problems with non-revenue water, meaning leakages in our pipeline, non-climate related, and this is a compounding factor. So as I said, this is the issue of our lifetime. And so we really have to be innovative when we talk about sustainable solutions. So I come from a environmental and water resources engineering background. And one of the key pillars in environmental engineering is really the triple bottom line approach, where you look at sustainability through the lens of using resources in a way that ensures the future generations can continue to enjoy the same level of comfort that we have. And I think as humans, we are altruistic in nature, and I'm optimistic that we will make the sacrifices to put people, profit, and the planet at the center of how we develop. But the paradigm shift that is needed is that we can't have economic growth models where we have unabated environmental degradation. So it means that the economic growth models need to be circular, meaning that we have to think more about how we reuse materials. Fundamentally, the approach to waste management, which is at the core of many of the problems that we face. How do we valorize waste? That just means how do we look at waste in a different perspective, not as a nuisance, but as a potential solution, and having some inherent value to the economy. So I mentioned we need innovation. And one particular area of innovation that I'm currently working on is artificial intelligence. So I have only 10 minutes, so I can't delve into other aspects of innovation. But this is one, I think, that really, the same way that we can't imagine a modern economy without electricity or without the internet. I think soon from now, we will not be able to envisage a future Barbados in 10 years without innovations like artificial intelligence. But the regulatory framework needs to be there. And we have to understand the potential downside, but I'll highlight the upside of this technology. And what this technology enables is for us to look at patterns in data that usually defy our human intuition. So there's been so many sensors, the democratization of sensor technology has led to lots of data. How do we analyze that data? How do we gain insights into that data that would help us to solve some of these environmental problems? And this is not theoretical. This figure shows, this is from a published study about 3 years ago in Nature Communications, looking at the impact of AI on sustainable development goals. So what this study showed is that in terms of these sustainable development goals and the targets, the upside to AI has positive impacts across 80% of the targets. And some of the things mentioned were, for example, AI for a smart grid, where we're putting more and more renewable energy into our grid, but grid stability is becoming a problem. When we have, certain less sunshine, we have a great demand. So how do we balance the two? Can we use AI to use water more efficiently in areas like agriculture? Those are some of the upsides to AI. But the downside, for example, would be the rise of disinformation. Some of these deep fakes, I don't know if you've seen videos of these authoritative figures saying things that seem unrealistic, but that is the potential downside for disinformation. So we really have to think about how we utilize AI, how we regulate, and in a service-based economy, how will we be affected, right? We depend heavily on tourism, so would AI be as disruptive to our economy as other economies? Where are the potential growth areas that around that issue? So now I want to go into research that we're doing at CERMES, at the Center for Resource Management and Environmental Studies, using innovative technologies, we think, to solve practical problems. At CERMES, we're about applied research that helps us to get to that future that is sustainable, that sustainable future 10 years down the line, so we could sing home to our children and grandchildren, well, we made it out of this crisis. And what I'm showing is, this is funded research by Microsoft, a software grant. And what I'm showing is the use of AI in helping us to understand exactly how climate change will affect our water resources. So you see this 3D image of Barbados, and if you hone in on the bottom figure, that's showing, well, under various climate scenarios, right? So the baseline is showing where we are now. The one to the right is showing, well, suppose we decarbonize the economy and the climate crisis isn't that bad. And to the far right is, well, suppose we continue on the same path. Then that's a difference between 40% less water and 20% less water, right? So these are the types of predictions that we make. And so with those types of predictions, how do we fashion policies and look at the trade-offs among various things like desalination? How much water conservation do we need? So with this type of technology, we're moving from an ad hoc type approach to a data-driven type approach that underpins decision making. This an area of artificial intelligence and that has, I think, scope for a big impact is with the ability of AI to actually see better than humans. It's called computer vision. So we actually looked at, and the problem we are solving here is the optimal allocation of resources after a disaster situation. So the image to the left is showing that we're using satellite images, and the output, the product we get, is this priority response map using AI to guide us in terms of, well, which areas, which water infrastructure we infer may be more impacted than other areas. And this was done for Hurricane Maria in Dominica. So areas in red would require more resources, priority response, areas in green, less so. So this improves the way that we allocate resources, and fundamentally, in small open economies, we need to be more efficient in terms of how we do things. This is the type of partnership, well, I think the outputs here highlight the type of partnership that I think is needed. So this is a North-South partnership, colleagues at Penn State University, and they have the lab resources, but we have we have computers, so we could do the data analysis. So what this is showing is that we can use microalgae to remove nitrogen, which is bad for the environment, but at the same time, we can recover things like protein, right? Which can then be used, for example, in agriculture. So this is the type of data-driven science, the type of new technology we think we can help to fashion, help to create, that address the multiplicity of issues around the climate crisis and really help us to get to a more circular type economy. The other area of research we're working on, the University of Southern Mississippi, Dr. Johnson, started this research, but we're continuing with myself, Professor Oxingford, Khalil Green, a research assistant. Not only are we able to predict the image on my left is showing we can predict, this is our latest sargassum outlook bulletin. Barbados is in the middle islands, and we're able to predict the influx when the sargassum arrives. But now we're using AI growth models to help us to predict how much sargassum arrives. So this will help to bring some certainty to the marketplace, because there's lots of interest in valorization, and our role is to develop these products that help with sustainability, but we think to help drive that circular economic growth. So it all sounds good, right? But it's not all good. The reality is that there are some significant barriers that we face because of our unique, we're the type of investments that are made in science and engineering are not where they should be as compared to developed countries. So in the US, there's the notion of a national science foundation that funds research that probably funded things like Google and all the cell phones that you use and so on. But there's not that same notion here. So it means that partnerships with the private sector, and we're happy last week we had the announcement of funding from Harris Payne's. And so part of that funding will actually go towards helping us bring that certainty to the marketplace around valorization of sargassum. The skills, there was an IDB report stating that about 60% of the graduates from tertiary institutions migrate. So if we build the jobs and fill that gap, I think we can help retain some of the talent that we have that deficit around. And then, as I alluded to before, partnerships. So there needs to be, we need to think carefully about, and I mentioned a type of partnership that I think works, but we need to think more deeply about public, private, and academic type partnerships. And I think that wraps up my 10 minutes. I would like to acknowledge, of course, the great collaborators from CERMES, from Penn State, and we're very interdisciplinary because inherently the triple bottom line model I show cuts across society. So you need social scientists, the economy, you need economists, and the environment. So you need environmental scientists, environmental engineers, so on and so forth. So we work with colleagues in social sciences. And of course, we're happy for the different agencies that are committed to funding the innovative research we hope to build upon and really build that sustainable future 10 years down the line. So we don't, so we meet the crisis with innovative solutions, and we have an equitable economy for everyone on the island. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Payne. Really innovative work. So please get your questions together for him to talk a little bit more about that AI and his work that he's doing with his colleagues in CERMES. All right, so next we're going to have Dr. Brewster, who will also give us an 8 to 10 minute presentation as well. Well, he got the hint.
Evening to everybody. For those who don't know me, I'm Leo. I'm the director of the Coastal Zone Management Unit, and I'm here representing the environmental wizards of the Ministry of Environment, Natural Beautification, the Blue and Green Economy. Environmental wizards because we are often the ones in the background that have to make something from nothing. All right? And within the Coastal Zone Management Unit, a lot of you probably don't know what we do, and a lot of you probably don't understand what the ministry does for as long as it's been around. And I'm just going to give you a quick run through as to the sort of things that we do and touch on some of the things that I think are going to be coming in the near future, some of which you're already seeing. I want to thank Karl because he gave a really good overview of a lot of the issues that are currently starting to be faced on island and the type of research that's going on at UE, especially in CERMES. And the type of caliber of students that are coming out of UE are something that needs to be highly commended, even though, as he's saying, a lot of them are actually perhaps not finding the type of jobs that they're looking for easily available at this time. At Coastal, we always try to be different, perhaps to our detriment, but mainly to our benefit. We've been around for 40 years, so you got 60, 50, and 40, right? And 40 this year as well. And people don't understand the transitions that we've gone through since 1983 when we first started as a project unit, where we were mainly focused on understanding why beach erosion was happening and what was the cause of coral reef death generally. Since that time, that has been our primary function for a lot of things that we do, because that has helped guide all the work that you see that has been built around this island to deal with climate resilience, right? Climate resilience, first and foremost, adaptation and resilience. We have worked extensively within the area of data collection, trying to understand our coastline, get a real appreciation as to what is happening to the reef systems themselves, working closely in the early days with Beller's Research Institute, and then transitioning over to MAREM and CERMES, and working more extensively then to try to ensure that that continuity is enhanced and established in real terms. Our relationships also with our other ministerial departments is something that we try to also ensure is realistic. We work very closely with the Policy Research Implementation Planning Unit. We also work closely with the Environmental Protection Department, because while EPD is responsible for coastal water quality monitoring, we're really responsible for water quality monitoring on coral reefs themselves. We do a lot of in situ, site-specific reef monitoring work, but every 5 years since 1982-83, we have been doing 5-year annual reef reviews with the assistance of CERMES, right? So we have practically one of the longest coral reef monitoring records within the Caribbean, which is something that we don't really brag about, but it's something that people take key note of because of it gives the trends of change that have been seen over time. We also have the longest record of beach profile data for the entire Caribbean as well, because I don't think anyone can really surpass us in terms of that. And when consultants come to deal with us, they're always amazed at the type of quality and caliber of data that we have. Reason being, we are led by science. We're not led by gossip. We're not led by political directorates, more or less, even though we have to be because they provide the financial backing for us. But we are led by science, and we stand on the science that we work with. So when you see Richard Hinds' boardwalk And when you see the West Coast Accessway stretching from Beachlands all the way up to Heron Bay, that is science at work. Coastal resilient science, okay? To adapt our coastline to what we know is coming. We've tried over the years to ensure that as time progresses, we are able to adapt to changes. We've adapted to changes even within our own office in terms of the turnover of staff, because the amount of people that have passed through our office and gone on to different avenues of work is astronomical over the 40 years. But they've always used our foundation to help chart their course over time. I think that what we have to recognize is, as everyone in here knows, because we're not really and truly preaching to the converted, because everyone here understands, climate change is real. Okay? There's no argument now. Climate change is real. What you're seeing in the Arctic, what you're seeing in the Antarctic is real. The ice caps are melting. Okay? The water is getting cooler. We're seeing aspects of sea level rise in the South Pacific at astronomical rates, which have not necessarily started to impact the Caribbean yet, but we know what is coming. We've already seen increased storminess. We've already seen the predictions of more intense storms coming more frequently, especially during the El Nino years. And we know that this year has drifted back into an El Nino run, so therefore we can expect a lot more storms forming a lot more quickly. We're also recognizing that water is going to be the next significant crisis for this country coming soon. Water is going to be the next significant crisis. Karl pointed it out in that graph, so you can understand where we are going, right? Energy is also going to be the next significant crisis after water, in my opinion, because energy is going to drive how we are able to be transformative for a lot of the activities that we do. And that speaks to transportation, that speaks to electricity, that speaks to all aspects. Energy is going to be a concern. Biodiversity loss, as we are currently experiencing, is something that, if we don't try to get a handle on it now, could prove cataclysmic in the future, maybe in the next 25 years or so. And that also speaks to the rate of development that is occurring in certain areas where we wouldn't have normally expected it to be. The progressive trend of change of mindset of developers and certain persons in terms of how they view the environment, okay? Economic development over environmental conservation. These things are real, these things are factual, but at the same time, we have to protect what we have. In that respect, we have now changed our focus from the coastline looking landward to the coastline looking seaward. As I keep saying all the time, and those that know me, all water flows to the coast. All water flows to the coast, right? Whether it's from the sea coming to the coast or from the land, overland, underland, all water flows to the coast. It is the most dynamic area of impact that you will experience, right? We have always looked at it from that perspective, and therefore we came up with a integrated coastal zone management plan that integrates disaster risk management and climate change adaptation into the portfolio of work that we now have to do. It's available on our website at www.coastal.gov.bb. Check it out. But at the same time, we've also recognized that marine spatial planning is something that is also going to be something that we are now addressing. Okay, as part of the Debt for Nature swap that the government signed in September last year, a marine spatial plan has to be developed for Barbados. As part of that process, it extends from the coastline out to the 200 nautical mile exclusive economic boundary, which means now that Barbados has to get very serious about how we plan to use our ocean space, the type of ocean governance and ocean governance initiatives that have to be developed and implemented, and the way forward in terms of how blue economy sectors are going to be rolled out, developed, and expanded. And in terms of blue economy, we're not just talking about fisheries and offshore oil and gas and tourism and port development, but all the other sectors that exist that have been well documented over time. One other thing that we should also be aware of is that our coastal cultural identity is changing and it's changing at a very rapid rate. Some of which some persons within their own public space and private space are not happy with, and you can see it in the social media platforms sometimes. But more importantly, it means that it can have an impact not only on our local architecture, but more significantly on the same ecosystems and vistas that we love to enjoy. At this point, I think I'm going to stop, because as always, I like to stir the pot from deep and bring up things that people don't like to discuss. So I will pause now and deal with comments and concerns later. Thank you.
Excellent job. So you can see that we're having some really great presentations here today. So I hope you're writing down your questions, you're getting ready for the question and answer session. I have some questions for the first two presenters already. So Mr. Hinds, over to you.
Okay, imagine. This is a groove, and if you know the tune, you can just shake your head. Special shout out to the Center for Creative Imagination. Barbados in 10 years' time. This is your environmental journey. This is your energy journey. I am William Hinds. As he said, I'm the youngest. So, imagination. Shout out to Nation newspaper. You have a green section. Maybe you need to have an imagination nation section. So, imagine we know that climate change can ruin us. You've heard that before. Really ruin us. And based on the concept of our presentations, we have looking at 10 years in the future. But what is this future going to be if we don't change our habits? Imagine on a beach here in Barbados, in the Caribbean, or anywhere. Imagine tomorrow's generation can save us. We can, but they must, because it is their future. Imagine if they can just stand on the beach and raise their hands and say no to climate change, no to the ravages. No longer should this be their imagination, but it should be our action, rather than waiting for tomorrow's generation to take the action. Imagine this is me. I wish it were, but it's not. But there's someone here or over there or somewhere around who has gotten to that point. We have the power to have our own power. Imagine. Imagine that thousands of us are equally powerful. Tens of thousands, all raising up to be empowered, to have the power, to drive the power, and to be the power. Imagine. Imagine all the plants and the trees that give us food, protection, housing, and stuff. Imagine the plant extract that can run electricity stations, power generating stations. Hawaii has demonstrated biodiesel on 120 megawatt station. That's more than we use at night in terms of power. Imagine that the UWI's own vehicle biofuel project, imagine it takes off and becomes a global success. Imagine all the people. Imagine people signing up not to buy land or houses or to cars. Imagine communities, youth groups, scouts, parent-teachers association owning major energy projects, controlling their energy destiny. Imagine you or I signing up and being part of that success, becoming a member of an organization of community people, PTAs, Rotaracts, owning the power, controlling the power, and of course making some money. That's important. Imagine Barbados, we are a large ocean state. So we do large ocean stuff. Imagine fishing boat, fishing next to these offshore wind turbines in our large ocean of our large ocean state. Imagine. Imagine when we have excess sugar, we export it. When we have excess crafts, we sell them to the tourists who take them away. We export. Imagine we produce excess renewable energy, electricity, and we export it as well. Not in terms of electrons, but hydrogen. Or we store the hydrogen for further use in Barbados to help with the stability of the grid. Imagine the transmission lines, the electric poles, substations, or electric grid. Imagine, as my colleague offered the leading, the grid gets smart. Not as smart as chat GTP. And the grid does not talk back to you. It listens and does. But imagine, in order to make all this renewable energy work on your grid has to have that knowledge and it has to have that creativity. Indeed, the grid must be smart and it must be able to imagine. For smart consumers like yourselves, we have to have a smart and resilient grid. Imagine the next time we fly to a conference and we are believing that we are impacting negatively on the environment because of the emissions of that plane. Imagine that we are using biodiesel. Boeing is looking at having 100% biodiesel for their air transport. And of course, you may need it for your next air taxi. I would like to ride one of those tomorrow. Imagine the next time. Right. So, imagine that our renewable energy, imagine our energy future. Imagine that you and other people in this room and throughout Barbados are now the masters of our destiny because you determine our energy future. Not Leo, not the university professor, not me in the government, but you are the masters of your destiny because the power should be in your hands to decide what power we use. So let's wind it down. Imagine as the sun sets on today and we begin tomorrow. Imagine the journey to tomorrow's energy begins with the vision today. 10 years from now, we speak of our achievements, but our achievements begin today. And so, as I wind down my presentation, the words that we have, that all of us have, is that renewable energy is there for all of us. We just have to reach for it. Thank you.
Excellent job. So 3 really great presentations. I can't wait to challenge you guys with a couple of questions. I'm going to start first, and please, if you have any questions, just raise your hand and the mic will come to you. But I'm going to start first with you, Karl. I'm just going to use first names. You guys can call me Winston. That's what my daughter does. So artificial intelligence has been in the news a lot recently. And we're talking about 10 years from now. What are you really excited about in relation to AI and the environment 10 years from now? What are you looking forward to seeing in relation to those two things?
Yes, thanks, Winston. I'm really excited about AI being able to, and because my wheelhouse is in water, but of course water is connected to, as I mentioned, energy issues, health issues, agricultural issues. I would like to see 10 years from now where, to invoke some poetry from one of the other panelists, we could imagine a future where we have AI mainstreamed, assisting with our water resources managers to make better decisions. By better decisions, I mean, do we know how much, what the level of conservation efforts are required? Do we know that we necessarily need more desalination, which is 3 times more expensive than groundwater? Can we use AI to better help to better manage our precious groundwater resources, right? So, as I said before, it may defy our intuition, but using AI, we can gain insights, new insights that are not possible without the technology to make better decisions. And by getting there, especially with the climate crisis, as I showed before, those are some of the predictions coming out of the AI models, we're able to have, then the water authority would be better able to deliver a less intermittent water supply to the population. So I think I'm excited about the potential for AI to be mainstreamed, to be embedded in operational usage for the day-to-day type decisions, so that we know how the supply needed, the policies needed to meet the future demand under a changing climate.
Okay, great. So, Leo, I'm going to ask you a similar question, but I'm going to change it up a little bit. Suppose, you had unlimited resources. And you could formulate a project that would deal with our coasts. What would that project look like? And what would be the benefit for Barbados 10 years from now? Unlimited resources. Obviously, I'm not the Minister of Finance.
You're really pushing this imagination thing now.
I know. Right?
I think that so the activities that we're doing, as I keep saying all the time, is science-led. And some people don't like it when I keep saying that all the time, because some people think that because we've been doing this thing for so long, we have a lot of the information already. You never get tired of having information. Our problem is that we never get to use it as we would like. So we have to bring in other people to do the activities that we would like to get involved in, while we're more or less supervising to ensure that we get the type of product, quality of product that we want to be represented on our coastline, that ensures that we have a coast to be proud of, which is our motto. Something that is generational in terms of, if we make the change, it's going to be there for a long time for people to experience, while at the same time ensuring coastal stabilization, coastal enhancement, coastal stability, etc. So for me, I think that the ability to effectively understand, appreciate, and model every aspect of the coastline, which would then aid us in the ability to prioritize the areas that are definitely critical for preservation. And from our perspective now, this speaks now to not only the coastline, but more significantly offshore, because, as I keep saying, the Marine Spatial Plan is something that we have to get very real about. I feel that getting a better understanding and appreciation of what's out in the big blue is something that has always been niggling at the back of my mind since 2019, when the Ministry of Maritime Affairs and Blue Economy was formed, principally because it isn't only a buzzword and catchphrase now. Everyone is looking at blue economy sectors that never were being looked at before, because we only focus on our immediate fringe, the coastal zone, right? We've already been approached by entities to get into areas that we never were thinking about at all. So onshore, in terms of preservation of coastal scenic landscapes, landscape management, coastal ecosystem preservation for ecosystem services, development, and stabilization. And then moving into the offshore, protection of resources, better management of the ocean, space and ocean governance, if I had an unlimited budget. And always at the same time, ensuring you're building adaptation structures that are suitable to ensure that our coastline is climate resilient.
Okay. So then to you, William. 10 years from now, you've introduced a number of renewable energy technologies. Which technology are you most excited about to see 10 years from now?
Hello. Well, the most exciting technology would be cars that fuel themselves while you drive, except if it's a rainy day. solar cars.
Agreed.
It's today's
Yeah.
emerging technology that is happening tomorrow. So I want to know that in 10 years from now, when I get into the car that I design, of course, I drive it around Barbados with my friends and family, and there's no gas tank, there's no charging any wayside car charging facility, because as I was driving, my car was actually grazing in the sun, collecting the sunshine so that I can drive.
Excellent, brilliant.
But they don't have that already, like in Sweden, where some roads have these things that you can charge cars while you're driving?
You mean with the sun? Yeah. Okay, so 10 years from now, it's commonplace. We have all of these technologies at the universities, in the research labs, or at the car shows as the prototype. What I want is not just a solar vehicle that I am driving, or a solar vehicle that my friend is driving, but a solar vehicle that each and every one of us has. That is tomorrow. A single vehicle is today.
Excellent. Now, I think most of you guys know that I'm an economist, so I'm going to bring down the mood a little bit, unfortunately. So Leo, what keeps you up at night about the next 10 years? What is that one challenge that, you know, that really keeps you up at night?
I think that really and truly speaks to the capacity for the coastal zone unit to be able to continue to adjust and adapt to what's happening as a result of climate change, right? It is something that, you know, you don't understand it until you are in it. And when you are in it and you recognize what is really and truly happening, you always have to be ahead of the curve. And it's always trying to think what the next project has to be. And the next project isn't only like doing those coastal adaptation mechanisms, but it's also looking at other aspects of environmental management for conservation, environmental activities for preservation, you know, establishment of new marine conservation areas, marine managed areas, marine protected areas around the island that are going to ensure that future generations have some level of possibility of seeing what we are seeing now, but in a better state. Creation of new habitats, those sort of things. It's sometimes it gets painful, but it's those sort of things that you always have to be thinking down the road. So William is right. You have to keep thinking forward to ensure that you are going to be prepared. Sometimes, you know, when you're doing it, people think you're too far in left field, but if you're not, you know, you go to a conference and then you hear these same sort of things coming up. So it's a growing concern for me.
And Karl, you mentioned the whole issue of climate change and the potential impact that it could have on our water resources. Some people suggest that, you know, in relation to climate models and climate projections, you really can't project what will happen in the future. Sometimes it might be even worse than what you're thinking. Is that something that is possible in relation to our water resources?
Yeah, so I think there's always uncertainty. And as scientists, we have to deal with uncertainty on a constant basis. I would agree that there's no perfect climate model, but the consensus, I think the consensus among scientists globally is that what the climate crisis will do in particular to this region is that it will cause rainfall to decrease. I showed by 10% by 2050. I think by the end of by
Could
the
that
end
be
of the
higher, though?
century. It could be higher.
Yeah.
It could be higher. And if it is higher, then it means that, as my colleagues are saying, we need to innovate, right? As Steve Jobs said, innovation is what separates leaders from followers. So we have to be creative now in the face of uncertainty. And the other thing I should mention, another serious issue, is related to saltwater intrusion.
There you go. Right.
Because of sea level rise and this problem of declining rainfall. And it's not something theoretical. In the north of the island, the water is too salty, right? So how do you deal with these issues?
Could you expand on that a little bit? What are the implications of...
So the implications of that, the main implication is that you have less potable water available, right? Because some wells, for example, I went out with the BWA maybe sometime last year, we took out the students, and they were showing us the concentrations are above the guidelines set out by the World Health Organization. So they can't use some of those wells for potable water supply. With the climate crisis now, it's going to make it worse because it takes rainfall to flush out that salty water, right? So not only are we dealing with a water quantity issue, we're dealing with a water quality issue. Now, as an economist, I'd like your take, because how do we finance these things, right? Well, in the energy sector, there's lots of interest around solar energy projects and their bankable projects and so on. Water is seen as a public good. And so things like investment, and my understanding is that for each kilometer of pipeline, it takes $1 million to rehabilitate. There's ongoing program. So how do we finance the things that are needed to really help us to address some of the other issues? The other thing I should mention is I'm happy that and I think one of the key things that we need is really regulation, environmental legislation is critical, and I was happy to see the recent legislation around water reuse. For example, in Israel, I think 90% of the wastewater is actually reused. And that solves a couple problems. That helps us to reuse water, for example, for agriculture. And it puts less burden of nitrogen on our coral reefs. And if we don't have healthy coral reefs, Leo would tell you we don't have an economy. So yeah.
So he's putting me on the spot. Financing public goods is probably like a whole lecture. You could spend an entire semester talking about financing public goods. But the main thing in relation to financing a public good crisis like that is that you have to realize that everyone has to chip in. It's not an issue that the private sector faces. It's not an issue that households face. It's an issue that has to be dealt with at a collective level, because it's a market failure. So we use that term in economics a lot. Whenever you have a market failure, it means that the government needs to step in and provide that public good. And one of the things that happens with water, and I think you would know this quite well, Karl, is that we tend not to price water at a level that would address the issues in terms of investment, address issues that would allow us to deal with the non-revenue water, to deal with the climate change issues. So it's a sort of like a very holistic approach that you need to deal with this problem. If you're talking about financing, it's not just getting more funds into the system. It also means looking at issues of innovation, seeing how you could deal with those problems in a very innovative way as well. But it's definitely not a simple solution to this problem. So we have our first question. I'm going to come back to William with my dismal question a little bit later on. But we have our first question. Do we have the mic somewhere? Yes, please. Well, we have 5 questions. Please raise your hand so that, yeah. There you go.
Can you hear us?
Thank you, moderator. My name is Robin Mahan. I'm also from CERMES, but also from the Land Conservancy Barbados, a new organization. I want to say, first of all, thanks to the panelists for taking on a very challenging role, dealing with the question of where we want to be or where we should be in the next 10 years. And I think you dealt with it very well, each of you. Thanks. I heard a lot about technology and science, which I love and think are going to be very important components of where we go. But I wonder if we don't need to be looking a bit more radically or deeply into how we are set up to go forward. And I'm wondering whether, there's a question in here somewhere, guys, don't worry, it's coming. Whether our current model for growth is appropriate for the future that we want to see in Barbados. And while I let that sink in for a little bit, I'm going to ask you whether we need to rethink how we define growth here. And the reason I'm asking that is it seems to me that we've been a lot of focus on physical growth and on gross domestic product as indicators of growth, where we probably would be better off thinking more about human well-being as a target for growth, as something that we want to aim for in growth. And as a land conservancy person, I'm concerned that our current model of growth, I'm just elaborating a bit here while you guys start to put your answers together. Our model for growth is going to nibble away at our natural heritage, our natural capital, to the point where ultimately it will disappear or be so minimal that it won't be there for us to enjoy. But I come back to my larger question, and if the moderator wants to answer it, he's welcome too. He's very well placed to address it.
I'm going to let my
Thank you.
panelists start. Please, who will start first? William?
That's a very interesting and philosophical question. And you're perhaps right in that in 2023, we are at one of those points in the history of humankind where we are in transition. And tomorrow's generation will appreciate and experience what we can only dream of. The very important issue, and it's reflected in what the Prime Minister said at many of the geopolitical conferences. We need to value the earth and what the earth does for us more than our personal and group wealth, because at the end of the day, the earth will be unforgiving. And therefore, we have to look at not what we want, but what we want for the well-being of ourselves. And even although I'm a scientist and I'm trying to stick pretty close to the scientific mantra, I will say that even within the scientific community, we have to re-examine our values. In terms of energy, we have to re-examine our values in terms of how much energy we want that represents our carbon footprint. In terms of how we treat our beaches and our land space, we also have to do that. So I guess what I'm saying is that I agree with you inferred comment you're making, is that we are in transition and we have to relook at how we see ourselves and our needs and our wants, and understand that our wants should not exceed what the earth can provide for us, and maybe we need to focus on our needs. I don't think anyone else probably want to come in there.
Yeah, well, I think in part of my presentation, I mentioned that we need new growth paradigms. The paradigm of, for example, the way we look at, and this is going to even touch on things like biodiversity. The way we look at flood management. It is about, just getting the flood water out into the environment. We can't look at it like that. It should be, at the same time while you're trying to mitigate flooding, can we improve the quality of water that we're discharging to the environment? And if we look at it through that lens, then we're going to inherently improve what you just referred to as human health, right? As part of our new growth model. And I think in terms of GDP, we can no longer solely look at those types of metrics, and the Prime Minister has been saying that ad nauseum, because we have vulnerabilities that other larger economies don't have. So a place like Dominica, I mean, 200% of GDP loss in one natural disaster. How can you treat Dominica in terms of the types of concessional type financing they have access to, as opposed to another country in the global north that is more resilient? They can absorb a shock and rebound. So I think we need to relook these traditional metrics, and we need a fundamental change. And I know you've been a proponent of the donut economy, and I think that's the type of thinking that we need to get to if we're going to address, I mentioned the triple bottom line, economic growth in a way that values the environment, and if we protect the environment, we're going to protect and ensure good public health.
Okay, so from my own end, he just reiterated what I said. All water flows to the sea. I agree with what you're suggesting, right? And being realistic, we know full well that that is something that needs to be addressed. Well, I know that. We try to incorporate it into the activities that we're doing at Coastal. It is an uphill task, right? It is a battle in some situations that we face. And sometimes, it's something that can infuriate people, especially the public, for two reasons. Because in our space, the coastal space, people view it as, opportunities lost, locations that they're accustomed to being changed, the health component being removed indirectly from them. But then we had COVID. And one of the first statements or series of statements that came out after the collapse of the tourism sector was, we have to move away from activities that focus on tourism and diversify our economy and be more environmentally focused, etc. Because one, for those 2 years, the earth took time to breathe and people started to see things that they hadn't seen in a long time, starting to restore themselves. And two, the primary dependence on one principal sector to drive your economy clearly demonstrates it's not sustainable in the long run. So I agree with you, Robin. I think that approaches have to look to change, but in a post-COVID environment where you need to reactivate economic drivers and stimulate an economy, the first place you go back to is what you know best, right? And the difficulty with that is that even if you were to be looking to try to say, well, we just came off of this really bad event, let us incorporate more green, more natural into design. No. The concept of the slash and burn still exists, right? So, you have situations where coastal forests may now, the limited coastal forests that we have, and we had a really bad example that we won't get into, but coastal forests may be denuded to build, and then you incorporate non-endemic sort of like vegetation species and thing to provide an atmosphere and environment that you could have incorporated the natural vegetation into, etc. So I think that it is something that we have to address. As I say, I stir deep when I pull in a pot. And I think that it is a reality that we will face, or we will be forced to be faced within the not too distant future as things progress.
Yeah. And permit me the opportunity to intervene in this one as well, too. I love economic questions, of course. So I think the problem here is because policymakers don't really understand the potential benefit that would take place from actually incorporating the environment into the measurement of development. I'll give you a really good example of this. When we install a solar water heater, the only thing that goes into GDP is the assembly of the solar water heater system. Now, if you were actually taking into account the environmental impact, you would capture the CO2 emission savings that take place as a result of that solar water heater. And that impact not only happens in year 1, it happens in year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, all the way up to 25, right? And those things, when you incorporate those into GDP, you actually have a larger impact on the economy. So my vision for 10 years from now is if we can actually incorporate those environmental variables into GDP. It is within our capabilities to do it. There is a system of national accounts that allows you to do it already. But the only thing that we don't do well in Barbados is that we don't collect environmental data. We collect economic data pretty okay, but the environmental data is something that is really missing, and we're sort of selling ourselves short because we've made so much progress in terms of the environment, but isn't captured in GDP. But if you have other measure, then the world could see that we actually made significant progress over the last 50 years in terms of the environment. So that would be my real vision because I'm a data junkie. All right. Next, thanks for that, Robin. Next question.
Hi, my name is John Knox. My background is electrical engineering.
Great.
Well, I'm really interested in water. I've been looking at it
Could you put the microphone a little bit closer?
I've been looking at water since 1987.
Right.
I want to make a suggestion. If you look at the groundwater units on the maps in the 1978 water resource study, you'll realize that the main groundwater unit that has not been used is the Scotland district. Now, if you read the 78 water resources study, you'll see the proposal is for impoundments, which really will not work. So the question is, how do you get access to the water? There's a lot of water down there, a lot, especially during the wet season. All you have to do is to stand on Hackleton's Cliff and look out to sea after downpour, and you realize there's millions of gallons going out there. So how do you get access to it? I'd like to suggest that if you look at the topography of the Scotland district, you realize that everything to the north of the Saddleback either drains into Long Pond or Green Pond. So what I would suggest is we look at the quality of the water. It may be pretty close to pure, not pure, but pretty close to fresh. You pump the water up to the edge of the escarpment, and if it needs treated, treat it. But you then inject it into wells along the escarpment and let it go seep its way down to the aquifers on the coast, the sheetwater area. You get a freshwater lens that is now thicker. You get less salinity. All that is theoretical. It would need to really be tested. But I think that's a way to get at the water. And regarding the quality of the wells, if you look at the 1978 water resource study, you'll see that even back then, every single well was at some, not salinity, but there was some some of the levels of some of the contaminants were out of spec with the WHO requirements. So what's happening now is really nothing new. I think in 10 years' time, if we don't deal with the water issue, construction makes absolutely no sense. And that, I think, addresses the growth model, growth paradigm that Robin raised. It makes no sense building houses, makes no sense building hotels if you cannot supply them with water. They either have to be able to, the activity either has to be able to support or financially support the sal to get from the sea, or, so I think that in 10 years' time, construction will probably be dead end. That's my view.
Very interesting comments and question. Yeah, so I think the difficulty is Barbados' geology exposes us to risks that other islands don't face too. So I didn't mention that there's a compounding risk. We have karstic limestone aquifers, meaning we have some large, almost pipe-like openings. So for example, in places like Bowmanston, they have to frequently shut down pumping because there's lots of sediment buildup and so on. So sediment and other contaminants get underground quickly. So you asked a question about another panelist about the nightmare. My nightmare is having to import water from Dominica in 10 years' time. I don't want that future for us. So I don't think we could take anything off the table, but again, is the level of investment you need to put in the requisite infrastructure and the treatment to capture runoff water and make it potable. And back to Winston's point, I think we need to understand not only the supply side, but the demand side. We need to understand, to use a fancy economist term, the price elasticity of demand, meaning if we were to increase the price of water by $1, how much less water would people be inclined to use? It's uncomfortable conversations, but in the face of a crisis, I think is necessary conversation. Yeah. So we can't just look at the supply side. We need to look at both sides of the picture.
While we're taking the next question, I want to ask William a question. So you have this really great vision for 10 years from now, but what policy change? I'm really simplifying these things a little bit, but what is that one policy change that you think we need right now in 2023 to achieve your vision?
Oh, how can I say but not say? How can I express an underlying philosophy?
You're at a university, right? So freedom of expression.
I would say that my greatest bugbear is that there are not enough people at the grassroots level who understand the huge financial opportunities and returns in investing in renewable energy. And if I could change a policy, I think I would try to enhance the intense levels of communication to people on the street to let them understand. No, I grew up hearing the banks ad like 50 times, and I know a few years ago it was called the brown with the red crown. But every person who knew that the banks, the brown with the red crown, or Digit, the various companies, they do not also know the value of investment at a household level in terms of the renewable energy. If I could establish a policy set and change, I will enhance the levels of direct communication.
Give us some numbers.
Household.
What are some of the numbers households should be aware of
Okay,
that would sell this case?
you can sell it.
Yeah.
If you're putting 5-10 kilowatt system, the bank is going to give you the money without you having to make a deposit. They will give you 100% in many cases. They would put maybe 3.5-5% interest on that. And you would make enough money that you can go to the bank and say, here's the bank. You know, you take your payment and there's still going to be money for you. So the reality is that in many cases, all people have to do is sign a piece of paper and money starts coming to them.
Correct.
Without them spending a cent. And it goes as low as a $15,000, $10,000 investment, and the bank is there sitting down waiting for you to come and say, here's the investment money because we are so confident that you are going to make it back. And I think that, you know, I wish I could go door to door, you know, not on Sundays, but I wish I could go door to door and explain to the average householder how easy it is and how well guaranteed it is for them to make that money. Really.
And if I may add as well too, you can write off that investment in those systems for tax purposes as well.
Even better.
So you're making money
There you
on
go.
this
Income
investment.
tax deduction.
You're writing it off for tax purposes. The
Income tax.
payback period on these things is almost like 2 years.
It
Yeah.
is ridiculous. I was.
And then if you add on top of that, if you get an electric vehicle, you're going to be driving using the energy from your system.
Yeah, I mean, we had the spread of things like people selling corn on the side of the road and pigtails and stuff like that. We really need to have that dramatic spread of householders coming on board because it's so wonderful. And, you know, Minister Lisa Cummins, Honorable Lisa Cummins would say that, yeah, I'm a preacher in that area, but it's really, really very important and great beneficial. So if there's any person here who have not done it for the house, please do it because it's such an easy opportunity. Yeah. You know, so that would be my policy change. You know, I would have an army of people going door to door, you know, not ask you if they can inspect your property to see whether or not the environmental health or asking you if you pay your taxes, but I would have an army of people going door to door just to spread the gospel according to making easy money as a householder.
So
And if you just one plug here, if you look behind us, one of the sponsors for tonight's event can help you with this as well. Just want to encourage you to look at our sponsors for tonight's event. We're very happy to have our sponsors. So Solar Watt is a very good partner that we can consider for this.
Yes, I just wanted to interject quickly. I feel as though there needs to be a policy around the mix of different types of renewable energy. We seem to be dominated by solar energy, but Leo mentioned we're a big ocean state. Where is the space for ocean energy? Where is the space for bioenergy that would help solve the waste problem? Are we going to have a grid that is all dominated by solar energy, and then 20 years, 30 years down the line, when we have, you know, this electronic waste, how are we going to handle the waste? So I think we need more holistic type policies. That would be my
Good, please.
Yeah.
I didn't believe that my fellow panelists would bowl a Yorker at me or a bouncer that I would have to duck. But I can say, as I see on the television ads, I'm glad you asked that question. Because right now, as we speak, United Nations Sea for All, Sustainable Energy for All, is actually a process of helping us update our energy policy and help to establish an investment plan. We are relooking at everything in terms of our mix, in terms of where we want to go. We're looking at storage, everything. So 2023 is going to actually be the year where we are not doing significant navel gazing, but we're certainly reconsidering. So if you believe that there's too much solar and you believe that there should be more biofuels, if you believe that there's too much biofuels and there should be less wind, We are looking at those numbers as we speak. And I can't tell you any more than that because once we have updated our policies and the new documents are being done and the studies are being done, an announcement will be made by someone.
Okay.
So that's my dodge.
Excellent. So let's go back to the audience.
Hello, good night. My name is Grafton Cobham, and I have a question for each person on the panel. But before I start, I'd like to congratulate William for his presentation. I thought it was very soothing. It was poetic as well as very musical. Now, first I want to address my question to Dr. Karl Payne for CERMES. Yeah. You know, it pains me to hear Barbadians day in, day out complaining. My water's off for 2 weeks. Can't get a shower. And it is really heartbreaking. And when we consider the presentation just now by John Knox, who says a lot of water is running off into the ocean, and he sees it when he's up there in Hackerton Cliff. And we, on the other hand, are saddled with something called a water and sewage tax. I'm sure most people here find that painful to pay that. But yet you have a Barbados Water Authority who was in water for over 100 years. And I want to know why it is that they do not have a water plant. And yet you see all kind of bad tasting water coming into Barbados from around the Caribbean, Jamaica, Trinidad, and all these, all blue water. So that's my first question to you, Dr. Payne. My next question is directed to Karl Brewster.
Leo.
Leo Brewster, right. We're talking about what's going to happen by 2033, 10 years from now. It saddens me to see Barbados, a country surrounded by Atlantic Ocean on one side, Caribbean Sea on the other side, or the Atlantic all around. And yet we are importing tilapia from China. We are importing salmon from Chile. I want to know if you see that by 2033, that this will be almost a minimum, and we'll be able to optimize the water around us. Where we will actually be exporting fish and not importing from these countries and other countries. My last question is to my friend William, who we know for a long time, who was in renewable solar energy for a long time. But William, I'll tell you this. My neighbor has a system on his house. And he told me that because Emira is changing the feeding rates and so on, he was making a little berry in the early days, but now he's making nothing. So, you know, you got to be careful when you make these statements. Maybe if you are going to set up a wind farm, a big wind farm, yes, you could make some revenue. But a household on a roof, if your bill is maybe $60, $100, $150, I don't know what money you're going to make. It never has the right to change the feeding tariffs at any time they feel like. I am putting this question to you. You were saying that we need to own the power. Yes, I agree with that. But I want to know if you see by the year 2033 that Emira will be no longer, but the light and power will not be really owned by Barbadians. Thank you.
Okay. So let's start with you.
Yeah, I'll address the first question quickly. I think the fundamental problem comes down to having a Barbados Water Authority where, what was the analogy? The fox guarding the hen house. So the service provider is the regulator. And I think if we separated the two, where we had a separate side for service, and a regulatory agency, so an actual water resources management agency. This is done in places like Jamaica. That's the exemplar in this part of the world. It's done in Belize. If we fix that fundamental problem and we focus more on water resources management, where they actually look at the data and the science to guide decisions that inform then the service side. Well, how much water should be abstracted? Where should cooperating with physical development planning, where should development occur, where it shouldn't, so that we make sure we maximize how much groundwater is recharging our aquifers. I think that if we, at a minimum, that needs to be the first step for us, I think, that would be the first disruptive step for us to addressing this perennial issue of water shortages and some of the increasing issues related to water quality.
Leo?
Just to build on what Karl was saying just now, there was a project way back in the late 90s as part of the water resources, water use, water loss study that was done through the BWA that did actually look at that whole concept of separating water resources from distribution and management and that sort of stuff. A lot of those recommendations that Karl just indicated were also identified as the way forward. I can't remember the name of the Ministry of Environment and what it was at the time, but it was part of the Ministry of Environment when water resources was part of the Ministry of Environment. And the grounding for it was solid. Going up the chain, there was a little reluctance and hesitancy to make that separation. And so it has remained. It has come back up because even as part of the whole water zoning reclassification that was recently concluded, the same issues were raised again. And the point that was raised before regarding the aspects of increasing presence of certain types of contaminants within the groundwater lens is something that is real, okay? A karst limestone, as Karl said, means that it's highly porous. In the 1960s, when the first groundwater zoning policy was laid out, we were predominantly sugarcane agriculture, and therefore you were looking to ensure that large lots of agricultural land were there to protect your groundwater well. And at the time, it was supposed to be a travel time of a molecule of water from the boundary of the outer boundary of the water zone to the well was supposed to take 365 days or thereabout, okay? But being karst, as Karl said, you have areas where water flows like a river underground, as you will see if you go in Harrison's Cave, okay? Bowmanston is a classic example whereby when water flows into Bowmanston, sediment resuspension is what causes the requirement for it to be shut down, and that really can be controlled when Bowmanston starts to flow in terms of recharge. So you have to shut down. We've had increasing development all across the country as a result of that, and a karst limestone is like a sponge. At some point in time, it's going to become saturated, which then, when it becomes saturated, means that you have greater free flow of water reaching your aquifer, some of which is contaminated, some of which may be from surface water runoff and recharged through gullies, which is why things like illegal dumping in gullies can cause problems even for direct recharge for some types of aquifers. But the biggest problem is that some of the contaminants that are being found in water now include things like pharmaceuticals, caffeine, other medication products that we weren't seeing years and years ago. So it isn't only just the concept of its agricultural or agrochemical contaminants or sewage that is getting in there. There are a lot of other things that have become commonplace in terms of everyday use now across this country for the last 50, 60 years that are now starting to show up. When a sponge gets saturated, everything that is in it starts to flow out through the bottom. We have to be careful. I said up there, the greatest challenge we will face is water. And everyone is here. is saying the same thing in different ways, okay? The reality is that we have to make sure that there is some effective management of how water is going to be managed in the future. It has to be done, and that time, like everything else, is really and truly fast approaching if it isn't already on us. In terms of the question that was raised, the question of mariculture is something that I love to discuss because it fits in with the blue economy space development as a new sector. It's something that we aren't doing, but it has started. If you're aware, in the area just off Six Men's heading north, in the area of Sherman's, Clinket's area, heading into Half Moon Fort, there's a small mariculture project that has now started to look at the use and outgrowth of CMOS with the Barbados Investment Development Corporation, now Export Barbados. The problem with looking at things like cage culture and sort of fisheries development within a marine space is, as was presented before when we had the same offshore aquaculture project off of Half Moon Fort, was the issue of disease in terms of stocking of cages, etc., and the numbers of fish you have in, and also the type of hormones that can be applied. Technology exists now where in certain countries you can see acres and acres of these things, okay? That's fine. The reality is that when you look in a freshwater lake in China, they can be as flat as a bake. We got real waves around us that are seasonal and dynamically changing. And we have other environmental parameters that have to be addressed in doing that. I look forward to the day when we can have mariculture, especially in terms of cage culture for fisheries development as a new frontier. It could be sooner than we think, but at the same time, certain safeguards have to be put in place to ensure that our fisheries sector is protected, okay? Because you can't be producing these thousands of tons of fish in cages for some local consumption and then our local fishermen suffer in a significant way, which can happen if certain types of fishing products are flooded onto a market or indirectly flooded into a hotel sector where certain existing markets would have already been existing for local fishermen to be operating in, or even restaurants, etc., etc., etc. So management of how the product is used is essential, but I agree with you and support you. If we can generate those sort of cage culture products for export, then we will be sailing. And I have no problem with that 100%. Locally, we already know that there is local tilapia that is being raised on a very small scale, but that is also through a targeted market that in essence goes directly to supermarkets and also to certain restaurants along specifically the West Coast. But there are other potential opportunities for new fisheries within a blue economy sector that can also assist as part of a marine spatial planning process in helping you to guide where new activities can take place. And we're hoping through the MSP process to start looking at that as time rolls along to get that done. Hydroponics and aquaponics are other activities that are also taking place on a very localized, cottage industry sort of setting, right? And that's more or less for personal consumption at this time. The reality is that within recent days, you would have heard Minister Indarwir talking even about a shrimp project that is now starting for aquaculture development on the island. And that is something that has great potential should it be able to roll off effectively. The persons that are involved in that, I really and truly don't know. The location where it's going to be taking place, I'm pretty much uncertain of, because we as coastal haven't seen an application yet for the development if it's on the coastal space. But if it's inland doing freshwater shrimp, then that is something new and different and should be something that should be lauded. I would just stop there for now. Thanks.
William, you want to take that question?
Yeah, my colleague has indicated that his friend is not making the same berry he was making before, and he was looking at the utility. And the reality is that for those who have a solar system, a renewable energy system, your system revenue coincides with the money you pay the utility for using electricity. So over the last couple of years, you get 1, 2 in terms of your check from the utility, and you're happy about that. And then based on your energy use, then you give the utility back 1. And therefore, at the end of the month, you have this one. What actually happened last year is that you're still getting the 1, 2 from the utility. So you're happy about that. But thanks to what's been happening in Ukraine, the price of electricity has gone up. And therefore, even although you're still getting the 1, 2 from your lovely solar system, now thanks to Ukraine, the same amount of electricity you're using, you're having to give back the 2. So you're thinking that it's empty, and that it's empty forever. But I don't expect that what's happening in Ukraine will happen forever. In fact, we got notice last week that Russia may have its own internal issues and may not want to continue forever. So there's going to be a chance that your friend who's complaining that he wasn't seeing as much money as before will find that sometime in the near future, when he gets his 1, 2 from the utility for the sunshine that he's selling, the amount he spends will just go back to 1, and every month he will have a little bit left back. So that is the answer to that question.
Okay, excellent. Really good visual illustration as well. So Leo, I have a question for you. We've been talking about climate change, and we have projections for sea level rise for the world. And obviously this has implications for Barbados. What will be the implications for our coastal communities 10 years from now? And what can we do? Is there anything we can do with the projections for sea level rise?
Yes, there is. I think that as part of the work that we've been doing since the 90s when we first started to build our coastal engineering structures, we've always tried to integrate the climate change considerations into our engineering designs, and that still continues. The unfortunate reality, though, is that sometimes in the more recent years as we've been doing works, persons have looked at the increased scale of the size of our structures and wondered why we're building them so big. And when we tell them that it's because we're trying to adapt now for what's coming, people think it's unnecessary. But I will tell you this, if I get these dates right, in around 2006, we had a sea level rise around the island of 25 centimeters, okay? And in doing that, this is a situation where the consultants that we were working with when we were building the Richard Hinds Boardwalk and the West Coast work were looking at altimetry data, satellite data, etc., and monitoring water levels. And we had started to notice that in some of the setup around the structures, the water was looking above normal in terms of usual height. We saw excessive erosion around much of the coastline of Barbados. Anybody remembers this? Because the first thing that happened is that everyone said that the work that Coastal is doing in those 2 locations is causing erosion all around the island. All around the island, right? And what the sea, when you build out one place, the sea just take it back somewhere else. And all the old wives' tales started to come out about the land is get reclaimed and this and that and the other, okay? 2006, that was a 25 centimeter increase in water levels around the island, and it sat there for about 2 months. And when we look back, it appears that it was as a result of increased runoff from the Amazon. And these gyres came out from the Amazon waters and the Orinoco. And it happens every year. We call it the green water that's moving through the Caribbean. And sometimes it's very transient. It would last for like maybe 3 weeks to 6, 8 weeks, and then it goes. But this time it has sat down for like 2.5 months, and it had led to this increase of fresh water sitting on top of seawater for that period of time. And it caused all this erosion. The next time it happened was in 2016, where we saw a 32 centimeter increase in water level around the island off of the same phenomenon, right? And similarly, we saw the increases in the water levels around the island. The complaints for erosion at that time were not as significant, but this time it was around the island for like 4 months. So normally the green water comes in February and by May it's gone. But this time it came in March and it left at the beginning of June. March, April, May, June. Yeah, it left at the beginning of June going into the hurricane season. That is the time when our beaches normally recover after the post-storm winter swell event period. And we need that area of recovery to allow the beaches to recover prior to going into an active hurricane season. And in 2016, we had an active hurricane season and our beaches were decimated by wave action, not by storm wave action from a lot of hurricanes passing to the east and north of us, right? And then just last year in 2022, we saw a 38 centimeter increase in water level around the island, right? And I didn't even know that until we were having discussions, because we were actually looking at the other structures that we're getting ready to build now as part of the potential next project with the IDB. 38 centimeters of water around the island, and that sat around us again for another 4 months. Okay, so pseudo sea level rise is something that we are seeing on a more frequent basis. It is therefore real. Unfortunately for us, our engineering designs are accommodating it satisfactory at this time. So we've been able to meet that requirement, okay? But after 4 months, the water is gone. The beaches are able to recover. If we have 38 centimeters perpetually around the island, our beaches will be decimated. And that's just from sea level. I haven't even started to talk about the impact of sargassum on beaches and the level of erosion that is being experienced as a result of sargassum on beaches. But for those of you that want to see, if you're accustomed to going to Long Beach, go and take a look at Long Beach now. The beach has actually eroded to the base of the 4 dunes of Long Beach. And if anybody knows Long Beach in Christchurch, it was over 40 to 50 meters wide as beach before you actually got to the sand dunes. But over the last 5 to 6 years, the presence of sargassum has decimated that. The crane is now flat. The water, when high tide comes, rushes up to the base of the sand dunes at the crane. Okay? On the East Coast, if you go down to Cattle Wash in the corner, but when you come off the East Coast Road, take a step off there and look up the East Coast Road, and the waves are reaching the base of the sand dunes all along the entire East Coast. What used to be a very wide East Coast, and where you see a lot of rock outcrops in the near shore, all of those used to be covered with sand years ago. It is cataclysmic. Not catastrophic, cataclysmic in terms of the damage that sargassum is doing to our beaches. Skeets Bay no longer exists. River Bay has been dynamically impacted, as everyone knows, and is constantly being reported. And coming around North Coast, sometimes Archers Bay is also impacted, but you don't hear as many comments about it. So we are facing beach erosion impacts on a significant scale that has to be addressed. And it isn't just as simple as building a couple structures offshore and pumping sand. Because if the reefs are not generating sand, which they are not like how they used to, we have a major problem, okay? If sargassum, when it's rotting and it discolors the water, occludes the light, it causes other issues that can impact on the reef systems and the associated organisms. And therefore, that impact on the nearshore fringe reefs is also very, very significant. We've just been blessed in that right now, our west coast has not been hit with sargassum yet. yet, but at the same time, the reality that we face is sargassum is coming every year. Don't mind what people are saying. From the first week in January, you can almost look at your clock and bet that on January 1st, sargassum will touch down in this country to start the year off right.
All right, thanks a lot for that. Let's go back to the audience.
Thank you very much, panelists, for very interesting presentation. And thank you for that overview of what has been happening over the last 5 or 6 years. What I want to ask 2 questions, and probably before I ask the question, make the statement, sorry, my name is Badilaria, and I want to say this, that I was on the 2 minds of coming here today because I didn't think, and I said this to the CEO of the nation today, I didn't think I was going to hear anything to excite me. But Mr. Hinds, you have done that by imagining. But the last statement you made was that I think I'm correct in saying that tomorrow depends on the vision of today. I had the vision for the world in 1977, and there's things that we have to do. So you excite me, imagine. And I'm saying it's not for the next 10 years. We have to prepare for the next 4 years when Barbados will commemorate its 400th anniversary as a colonial outpost. 400 years under draconian exploitation. So the world is changing in a way that is to repair some of the damage that has been done. It's not a coincidence that our Prime Minister is probably the most recognized politician in the world today. And everyone is talking about the Barbados Initiative, not only what happened the other day. It's not a coincidence. This is the 530th anniversary of the Caribbean being, or the West being decimated by the legacy of Christopher Columbus. 530 years. People will be confused, and this is why your presentation is so important. Barbadians do not know the history of Barbados, so therefore they cannot appreciate what we are seeing, what you are discussing. And I ask one question.
Sure.
If according to the Prime Minister, the area, the sea area around Barbados is 400 times the size of Barbados. Water, how can we be a water scarce country? It does not make sense. I traveled to Africa, and I know Gaddafi turned Libya, that is in the desert, into green area. So don't tell the people in Barbados that Barbados is a water-scarce country when God has provided us with all the water we need. It's just to take the technology that is now available to us, and it could come through the AI, to transform Barbados. But we have 4 years to work on it because something else is happening that if we don't get it right, something else will happen. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Karl?
Yes, thanks for the question. And to the first point, I think climate justice is a growing movement. And at the COP27 last year, that was the signature climate conference. It was the first time that they recognized the destruction that has been caused historically because of the Industrial Revolution, and there's a loss and damage fund, but it's yet to be seen how small island developing states will benefit, how the financing works, and so on. But there's that recognition, and I'm happy that Prime Minister Motley has been at the forefront of pushing some of those initiatives. But with that being said, we can't escape that we need to have our own homegrown solutions, and we need to really use innovation in a way that harnesses, as you were saying, but the issue is that yes, we're surrounded by water, but that's salt water. So we need to remove salt from the water, and that's expensive to do. I was making a point earlier that desalination water is 3 times more expensive than groundwater. But to your point, though, we need to improve groundwater management. We can't keep saying Barbados is water scarce. Yes, we have issues. I have a colleague that worked in Namibia, and he would say they're actually almost desert-like conditions like Libya, but somehow manage Israel. It's another place that does it. So we need to focus on enhanced water resources management. So that would be my response to the questions.
All right. Thank you so much. Just one last question. Yeah.
Good night, everyone. My name is Barney Gibbs. I'm the chairman of the Future Center Trust. Mr. Hinds made a comment earlier that we can be the energy. I found that interesting. I think he meant it metaphorically, but I would like to explore that literally. Imagine using the energy stored in our bodies as a form of renewable, climate-friendly power. If we as a country embraced infrastructure, green infrastructure, that allows Bajans and visitors to walk and ride bicycles safely, we would see a huge uptick in active, sustainable transport. I'm talking here about continuous sidewalks, completely separate bike trails, and legislation that allows or makes bikes and e-bikes affordable. Before we look around, we could have affordable and equitable transport effectively powered by breadfruit cocoa or whatever people are eating. I want to suggest that I want to pose a question to each of the panelists where, or I should say, Professor Moore mentioned the concept of a public good. And one of the issues that we're having in delivering a project such as the Barbados Trailway, which imagines repurposing the old train line as an active transport network, is that it is a public good. So, as he mentioned, everyone would have to contribute in a holistic way. So in terms of each of the panelists, I wanted to suggest a tangible way in which that could happen and ask for your comments. So Dr. Payne, your expertise is in water resources, and Reverend Larrier mentioned about better use of water resources. I know that there's talk about taking the water, the 4 million gallons that's going across the reef from Graham Hall right now, and treating it to tertiary level, and then distributing around Barbados as a form of agricultural water. If that could be done, if water could be pumped from Graham Hall to river using the old train line, something like the Barbados Trailway, could it not piggyback on a project like that?
Yeah, so you're, okay.
And to Dr. Brewster, you mentioned about post-COVID an appetite for outdoor recreation and pushing further inland tourism. I know that you have input into the planning process, and there's a concept called planning gain. When developers, as you mentioned, when developers come here and they want to do various projects, could they not be encouraged to contribute as part of their permission to a project like such an active transport network? And Mr. Hinds, I know you too have input and are consulted when it comes to energy legislation. As it stands right now, bicycles and e-bikes are charged duty at the point of entry. Could you not ask for a reduction or elimination of that tariff? All of the presentations were very interesting and provoke our imagination. We saw pictures of high-tech solutions, but ultimately, the bicycle is a very efficient, sustainable mode of transport. Thank you. Let me know what you think about this suggestion.
Thank you so much for the question and the insightful comments. And I would agree, if it's one area that will help us to mitigate a lot of the negative climate change effects is in the area of transportation. So I would definitely encourage, I would like to imagine a future like what I see in Netherlands, where, you know, a lot more people, but there are cultural differences that we need to be cognizant of. So that is one of the limitations. So there needs to be a lot more public awareness and so on and so forth as to the benefits of that. And with the reuse is exciting. I think that's one of the areas that will help to perhaps build better food security, lower our import bill, but the trade-off is that we have to make sure the level of treatment is fit then for the purpose of agriculture. And there needs to be a lot more public awareness around, while we're not drinking that treated wastewater, we're still using a product that is derived from treated wastewater. So you really need to hold the public's hand and do a lot more engagement, so we get to imagine the future that you are envisaging.
Ronnie, nice to see you again. I think that the first solar-powered bus station was in Warrens, if I remember correctly. So we go back. Excellent idea for bikes. The USA Energy Policy Act actually include bicycle as an integral part of its sustainable transport. So I totally support it. Write the government. If it comes to my desk, it will get my little support. I don't run the government, but I certainly would recommend it.
I think that that is an excellent idea in terms of using the idea of planning gains to assist with these sort of initiatives. You know, the powers that be have to buy into that though, because they use planning gains at a different level. But in terms of a new investment opportunity and added attraction, I think it's something that is really and truly worthy of consideration. And also, it is something that once the other associated infrastructure can be rolled out in tandem, it will be something that will be highly useful and impactful. But bearing in mind too, there's a certain culture. So even if you were to say that, you know, the city center is in use for that as well as certain bike trails, etc., or cluster locations can use that. You have to park, get on an electric bike and ride around. That is something that would be great. I honestly think so.
All right, thanks a lot. So I think we've had a really excellent discussion this evening. I'm going to steal a little bit of William's approach to wrapping up. Imagine a future where households are using renewable energy for much of their energy needs. Imagine a future where we're using data to make better decisions regarding our coastal zones. And we're all imagine a future where we're utilizing AI to make decisions about water resource management. I think that sort of summarized nicely all of the contributions coming from the panelists. I want to extend my sincere gratitude to our panelists for their valuable contributions, to all of you today, as well as for your questions. I think we've had a really good discussion. I really hope that the discussion that we had today serves as a catalyst for visionary ideas, innovative solutions, and a renewed commitment to environmental preservation in the next 10 years and beyond. Let us forge a greener and more sustainable future for Barbados. Thank you very much. Now, let me invite Debbie Braffett, the advertising sales executive at the Nation Publishing, to do the final closing remarks.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Green Nation team, I want to thank everyone for coming out this evening, taking the time to come out this evening to hear our esteemed panelists and moderator sharing their knowledge and their information with us. I also want to say a big thank you to our sponsors. We could not have done this without you all. So we thank you. NASCO Limited, the Ministry of Energy and Business Development, Mint Condition, Solar Watt Systems, SBRC, Mount Gay Distilleries, Bees Recycling, and Garbage Master Limited. So I want to encourage you all to continue to follow our Green Nation events and activities on our social media platforms and in our Nation newspaper. And please share this information with a friend or two. We just want to keep the conversation going, and I just ask you to have a great evening and travel safely. Thank you. Join us in the lobby for a light refreshment.